Welcome, Toady. If you're trying to build a house in America right now, stop, set the hammer down, call your contractor, and ask one question. Where is the lumber coming from? Because as of this morning, that answer just shifted. And that shift is going to add thousands of dollars to your costs. For years, Washington has lived on a simple belief. Canada has the trees, America has the customers, and Canada will always sell, no matter how much we insult them, no matter how many tariffs we throw at them, no matter how chaotic the White House becomes. That belief just collapsed. Donald Trump tried to corner Canada. He thought the threat of a massive trade war would force Ottawa to bow. He thought Mark Carney would crumple like a cheap suit, but Carney didn't crumple. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he reached for a lever Washington completely forgot existed. You are witnessing a historic pivot. You are witnessing the moment the United States realized that being a superpower doesn't mean you can conjure natural resources out of thin air. Look at the markets this morning. Lumber futures aren't simply up, they're nearly vertical. Construction sites from Arizona to Maine are falling quiet. Why? Because the supply chain has been cut. This isn't just a trade dispute anymore. This is a siege. And for the first time in modern history, the United States is the one inside the castle walls running low on supplies. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened in the last 24 hours. I'm going to show you the specific policy Mark Carney triggered that caught Donald Trump completely off guard. We're going to look at the numbers they don't want you to see. And most importantly, we're going to talk about what this means for your wallet, your home value, and the future of the North American alliance. Trump wanted a fight. Carney handed him a math problem, and right now, the President of the United States can't solve it. So let's cut through the noise. What actually happened today? At 8 a.m. Eastern, the Canadian government made a quiet announcement. There was no flag-filled press conference with shouting. There was no angry all-caps tweet. It was simply a document released by the Ministry of Natural Resources, signed off by Prime Minister Carney. The document laid out a new framework called the Strategic Resource Preservation Act. Sounds dull, right? That's the point. It's meant to look dull, so the average person ignores it. But the White House lawyers who read it nearly had a heart attack. Here's the simple version of what that document says. Canada is imposing an immediate environmental sustainability cap on softwood lumber exports to countries that do not meet specific carbon trade alignment standards. Guess which country doesn't meet those standards under the current Trump administration? The United States. Effectively, Canada just throttled the flow of wood across the border. They didn't ban it. That would look like war. They just slowed it. They added a new layer of inspection, a new surcharge for environmental compliance, and a strict quota system. The result was immediate. Within 2 hours, the spot price for framing lumber on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange jumped by 15%. That is a catastrophic move for a single morning. By noon, major U.S. home builders, these are the giant firms building subdivisions in Texas and Florida, paused their purchasing orders. They literally stopped buying because they don't know what the price will be next week. Trump reacted exactly the way you'd expect. He went to Truth Social. He called Carney a radical environmentalist and a disaster for the North. He threatened to hit Canadian energy with a 100% tariff in retaliation. But here's the thing about shouting at a forest fire. It doesn't extinguish the flames. While Trump was typing, Carney was working. While the White House press secretary was scrambling for a spin, Canadian trade delegates were already on calls with buyers in the European Union and Japan, locking in new contracts for that same lumber. This is the shock. Trump thought he had leverage. He thought Canada needed us to buy their wood. But Carney just proved Canada has other options. And America needs the wood. We don't have a backup. We cut down our own forests decades ago, or protected them inside parks. We rely on Canadian spruce and pine to frame our houses, to build apartments, to remodel kitchens. By slowing that flow, Carney just reached into the American economy and squeezed the housing market until it popped. You might be thinking, is it really that bad? Isn't this just political theater? Let's look at the receipts. I want to show you 3 specific pieces of evidence that prove this isn't a drill. This is a full-blown economic counteroffensive. Receipt number 1, the inventory reports. Look at the data coming out of the National Association of Home Builders. Even before this morning, softwood lumber inventory was tight. That's industry language for we barely have enough. The U.S. imports roughly 30% of its lumber. Almost all of that, over 80% of imports, comes from Canada. There is no other country on earth that can fill that gap. We can't get it from Russia. They're sanctioned. We can't ship it from Brazil. The wood type doesn't match our building codes. So when Canada says we're capping exports by 20% this month, that mathematically guarantees a shortage. You can't build 80% of a house. You build the whole house or you build nothing. Receipt number 2, the green premium clause. This is the brilliance of Carney's move. He didn't call it a tariff. If he called it a tariff, Trump could sue under the USMCA trade agreement. Instead, Carney labeled it an environmental sustainability surcharge. He framed it as protecting Canadian forests from overharvesting driven by foreign demand. Legally, this is sharp. It ties Trump's hands. If Trump complains, he has to argue Canada doesn't have the right to protect its own environment. It drags the U.S. into a courtroom fight that could take years. Meanwhile, prices stay high today. Carney is using international climate law as a shield to deflect Trump's trade attacks. Receipt number 3, the ports of Vancouver and Montreal. We have satellite imagery and shipping logs confirming that volume at Canadian ports headed for the U.S. has dropped, while volume headed for Asian markets is ticking up. This isn't a threat for next year. The ships are turning now. There was a leaked memo, reports are circulating from Ottawa sources, that Carney's office instructed major timber firms to diversify aggressively 6 months ago. They were preparing for this. They knew Trump would escalate. While Trump was holding rallies talking about crushing Canada, Canada was building a lifeboat. And now they've launched it. Look at the lumber futures chart. Again, that spike isn't speculation. That is panic. That is the sound of American construction firms realizing they're about to lay off thousands of workers because they don't have the 2x4s to frame a living room. This is the part of the story where we have to talk about Donald Trump's psychology. Trump operates on a specific model of negotiation, escalation dominance. He believes if he's louder, scarier, and more aggressive, the other side eventually cracks. It worked on weak Republicans. It worked on some disorganized companies. But it's failing spectacularly against a G7 nation led by a central banker. Trump is losing control because he doesn't understand the weapon being used against him. He understands tariffs. He understands taxes. He understands insults. He does not understand systemic risk. Mark Carney is a former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. He understands the plumbing of the global economy better than anyone in Trump's cabinet. He knows the U.S. economy is fragile right now. Inflation is down, but interest rates are still squeezing people. The housing market is the one thing keeping the American consumer afloat. By targeting lumber, Carney is targeting the most sensitive nerve in the American body politic, the cost of living. Trump shouts, "America first." But when the price of a new home jumps by $30,000 overnight because of a lumber shortage, voters don't care about slogans. They care that they can't afford to move. And Trump has no counter-move. Think about it. What can he do? Can he invade Canada for wood? No. Can he force American companies to cut down national parks? That would take years of lawsuits. Can he buy lumber from Europe? Sure, but the shipping costs would make it even more expensive than Canadian wood. Trump is boxed in. He threatened Canada with a 25% universal tariff. Carney looked at that threat, ran the numbers, and chose to strike the U.S. supply chain first. It's a judo move. Carney is using Trump's aggression against him. The more Trump threatens, the more Canada argues it must diversify away from an unstable partner. Every time Trump tweets a threat, he strengthens Carney's case that Canada should sell its lumber to Japan, to Germany, to the UK. Trump is effectively Carney's best salesman. He's proving to the Canadian public they can't rely on the U.S., giving Carney political cover to do hard things. You can see the panic in Washington. The Commerce Department is holding emergency meetings. They're trying to figure out whether they can subsidize lumber purchases, but you can't subsidize what isn't there. If the wood isn't crossing the border, money doesn't fix it. We need to pause and appreciate the difference in leadership styles here, because it explains why this is happening. Trump is transactional. He thinks in 24-hour news cycles. Win the day, dominate the headline. Carney is structural. He thinks in 10-year cycles, change the system, dominate the reality. When Carney makes a move like this, it isn't emotional. You didn't see him go on TV and scream. You didn't see him call Trump names. Carney's method is what diplomats call quiet lethality. He frames everything as technical necessity. We are simply managing our carbon inventory. We are ensuring the long-term health of the Canadian forestry sector. It sounds polite. It sounds Canadian. But make no mistake, it's a ruthlessly efficient way to kneecap an opponent. By wrapping this economic strike in the language of environmentalism and sovereignty, Carney makes it extremely hard for the rest of the world to side with Trump. Europe isn't going to condemn Canada for protecting forests. The UN isn't going to sanction Canada for managing resources. Carney has built a coalition of silence. The world is watching Trump flail, and no one is stepping in to rescue him. Why would they? They'd prefer Canada's lumber going to them anyway. This is the adult in the room strategy. While the child throws a tantrum and breaks toys, the adult quietly locks the door and turns off the Wi-Fi. Carney is turning off the Wi-Fi for the American construction industry. And he's waiting for Trump to realize that screaming doesn't turn it back on. This restores Canadian sovereignty in a way we haven't seen in decades. For 50 years, Canada has been the polite junior partner. The unspoken rule was Canada does what the U.S. wants because the U.S. market is too big to lose. Carney is flipping the script. He's saying, actually, your market is too risky to keep. We're moving on. That is a terrifying idea for Washington. If Canada, America's closest neighbor, ally, and trading partner, decides the U.S. is uninvestable, What does that signal to the rest of the world? So let's zoom out. Why should you care if you aren't building a house right now? Because lumber is a bellwether. If Canada can do this with wood, it can do it with oil. It can do it with critical minerals. It can do it with electricity. Did you know huge chunks of the American Northeast run on hydropower from Quebec? Did you know heavy crude from Alberta feeds refineries in Texas? This lumber spike is a warning shot. It's Carney saying, this is what happens when you push us on a non-critical item. Imagine what happens if we tighten the tap on the critical ones. The implication for you is inflation. If the supply chain between the U.S. and Canada fractures, prices in America rise, not just for wood, for everything: food, energy, cars, aluminum. The North American economy is one integrated machine. Trump is trying to smash one part of the engine, assuming the rest keeps running. Carney is showing him that if you break the gears, the car stops. For the average American family, this means the dream of affordable housing just moved farther away. For the average Canadian family, this is a moment of pride mixed with anxiety. Finally, a leader is standing up. But there's a cost. If the U.S. economy crashes, Canada gets hurt too. Carney knows that. That's why this is a calculated risk. He's betting the pain will force the U.S. business community, the donors, the CEOs, the lobbyists, to walk into the Oval Office and tell Trump to stop. He is bypassing the president and squeezing the president's donors. It's a dangerous game. But right now, Carney is the one holding the cards. There's a moment from yesterday I can't stop thinking about. It wasn't in the press release. It was a photo taken by a local journalist in British Columbia. It shows a massive logging truck stacked with premium cedar. It stopped at a fork in the road just outside Vancouver. To the left is the highway leading to the U.S. border crossing at Blaine, Washington. To the right is the road to the shipping terminal. In the photo, the truck is turning right. That image says more than 1,000 speeches. For 50 years, that truck turned left. It went south. It built American decks and American fences. Yesterday, it turned right. That lumber is headed to Tokyo or Shanghai or Liverpool. It's gone, and it isn't coming back. That is the reality of the new world Mark Carney is building. A world where Canada charts its own route, even if it leaves America staring down an empty road. So where do we go from here? We are in uncharted water. Scenario A is the business revolt. The U.S. National Association of Home Builders, the Chamber of Commerce, and construction unions put massive pressure on Trump. They tell him to drop the tariff threats and cut a deal with Carney. Trump grumbles, declares victory over a minor concession, and things return to normal. That is the best-case outcome. Scenario B is escalation. Trump takes the bait. He gets angry. He declares a national emergency. He tries to seize assets or block Canadian trucks. If he does that, the border locks up. Then we aren't talking about lumber prices. We're talking about food shortages and factory closures. Scenario C is the Carney pivot. Canada permanently realigns its supply chain. It signs long-term binding contracts with Asian and European buyers. Even if Trump leaves office, the lumber is committed elsewhere. America loses preferred status forever. Right now, Scenario C looks more and more likely. This is the point where leaders usually cool it down. Diplomats usually meet in a quiet room and fix it. But Trump doesn't do quiet rooms, and Carney isn't asking permission anymore. We are watching a divorce in real time. And like any divorce, the lawyers are the only ones winning, And the kids, in this case, the citizens, are the ones paying the bill. This lumber shock is just the first domino. Mark Carney has drawn a line in the sand. He has shown Canada has teeth. He has shown America First has a price tag, and that price is being paid by anyone trying to build a future in the United States. The question you have to ask yourself is this: is Trump's pride worth the cost of your home? Because right now, the president is fighting a war against math, against geography, and against a neighbor who has finally decided to fight back. Carney isn't just defending Canada. He's daring Trump to recognize how much America actually needs its friends. Do you think Trump will back down, or is he going to double down and crash the market? Drop your take below. I read every comment, and make sure you subscribe because the next shoe to drop involves the oil pipelines, and you do not want to miss that update. Thanks for watching. Stay vigilant.